Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome to another episode of Poland Daily History. Today we are in the Praga district of Warsaw, in front of a statue of one of the great war heroes of the Polish Bolshevik War, Father Ignacy Skorupka. This statue is located right here, as he served this very church, and it was from here that his unit set out to confront the enemy. In early August of 1920, the Soviet Red Army was closing in on Warsaw. They were only a couple hundred kilometers away from linking arms with the Soviet revolutionary forces of Germany, Austria, and Hungary. Join us as we explore the Polish Bolshevik War, the Battle of Warsaw, and its impact on all of Europe. So as we know, the Polish-Bolshevik War started only a few weeks after the end of the First World War. I was wondering if you can tell me how did it all start and how did the initial phase of the war look like?
Polacy I ich siły zbrojne od początku przez bolszewików traktowane były jako wrogie.
Poles and their armed forces were treated by the Bolsheviks as hostile from the beginning. It was not because they would be ideologically hostile. Poles were simply not interested in the war between the White and Red Russians. Poles had the third way, a national road to freedom, and constituted an obstacle in spreading the revolution from Russia to the rest of Western Europe. Hence, the Polish Bolshevik War has three beginnings. It starts quite unexpectedly, and actually, you can even say illogically. Poland does not yet exist when the Bolshevik commander-in-chief, Commissioner Owsienko, declared war on the Polish Corps in Belarus, led by Dowbor-Muśnicki. On the 22nd of January 1918, the same corps representing future Poland was already at war with the Soviet troops. There were many clashes, murders, and even burying some of the Poles taken prisoner alive, which testified to the enormous hatred of the Bolsheviks for everything that was Polish. The second moment comes when Soviet Russia breaks the Brest-Litovsk Treaty concluded with Germany. One of the conditions of the truce in Compiègne, ending the First World War, was the annulment of all previous treaties. Bolshevik Russia took advantage of this, and on November 13, 1918, 2 days later, it set off from the demarcation lead set by the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, somewhere on the Dnieper, and started moving west. They clearly signaled their intention to the Vistula in Poland and to move on to the Rhine River in Germany. The Poles knew this well. The resistance to that march to the west was brought by the borderland self-defense units organized from Poles and Belarusians who did not want to be Bolsheviks. Minsk was a very special city. Today it is Belarusian, but then it was considered to be Lithuanian, in which the first battle with the regular Soviet army was fought on December 27th. Of course, the self-defense units were not able to defend themselves for long. They fought for as long as there was enough ammunition, and after, they had to retreat. The next moment happened in Vilnius, where large quantities of arms were smuggled in, and when the Poles, in their so-called New Year's uprising, chased the Germans away on December 31st, 1918, for the new year, January 1st, 1919, Vilnius was free and Polish. But suddenly it turned out that a communist crown nest existed and fought the Poles for 12 hours at Wronia Street or Crow Street. Eventually, these Bolsheviks surrendered. Most of them were local Jews, but there were also Poles and several Russians who were instructors of that group. Everyone was taken prisoner. Some committed suicide, but no one was murdered. After 4 to 5 days, the Poles had to leave Vilnius and give it over to the Bolsheviks, because we had too little strength. The establishment of a Polish state resulted in an agreement with Germany in January 1919. Germany finally withdrew. The Germans had earlier constituted a kind of buffer between the Soviet and Polish forces. Then the Polish army started moving east. The first clash with the Soviet army took place in a town which by now is historically well known, Bieroza, in which a Polish train entered the station and disarmed the Bolsheviks there. Because of this small fact of overtaking the Soviet aggression, many believe that it was the Poles who invaded the Russians. Meanwhile, we were attacked, and there is no doubt that the Soviet bulldozer was on its way west not only to destroy Poland, but to conquer Europe. This was the main goal, and Poland was only an obstacle in their way. From this moment, since the Bolshevik forces were initially losing the civil war, they began to withdraw eastwards. Polish troops reached far east to the border river Berezina. They occupied Babruisk and the city Borisov. In Ukraine, we reach as far as Kamieniec-Podolski, the Dniester River, and so the Polish Bolshevik front was put on hold until fights between the forces of Anton Denikin, an army of white, pro-Tsarist Russians, and Lenin's army, the Bolsheviks, came to a close.
Procarskich Rosjan, a armią Lenina, czyli bolszewików.
So once the Polish army started moving east, they allied with the Ukrainians, and I was wondering if you can tell me how that union looked like.
Trzeba pamiętać, że w 19 roku Polska jest w stanie wojny.
It must be remembered that in 1919, Poland was at war with both Ukraines, with Galician Ukraine, the one that came into being from the Austrian partition, and with Dnieper Ukraine, which was liberated from the Russian partition. However, peace is concluded quite quickly, on September 1st, 1919, and then talks are underway, during which Poles make Ukrainians aware that they had a common goal, at a time when both White and Red Russia do not want to hear about independent Ukraine at all. Józef Piłsudski becomes the natural ally of the ataman, or leader, of Dnieper Ukraine. Indeed, these two national leaders, Piłsudski and Petliura, were able to convince Poles and Ukrainians to cooperate. The result of this action was a preemptive offensive. The Poles had a great understanding that the attack on their country was coming and decided to overtake it by liberating Ukraine. Ukraine was later to create its own military forces and thus become our ally and protect Poland from the southeast. The first part was successful. Kiev was seized properly without a shot. Poles defeated all possible armies. However, those armies could not be completely eradicated. They withdrew efficiently behind the Dnieper River and dug themselves in there. Kiev was liberated, and in the main parade on the main street of Kiev, the Kreszczatyk, the army of Ukraine marched first, and Poles, as the supporting army, paraded second. Although we know that it was the opposite. Poles handed over a lot of weapons to the Ukrainians, although of course we ourselves received them from France. This situation lasted until June, when the Bolsheviks managed to bring the giant, tens of thousands man strong horse army of Budyony from the steppes of Asia, from the Caucasus. This army burst into the gaps between the Polish armies, reaching very deep, about several dozen to 100 kilometers to the hinterland of the Polish army. At the time, the only wise solution was to withdraw immediately. The Poles left Kiev in June, they were there for a month, and the Ukrainians also decided to leave. They started retreating towards Poland. At this point, on July 4th, 1920, several hundred Soviet trains, it's difficult to say the exact number today, but it was about 500, took full speed from 4 directions and broke the front in the northeast, near Polotsk. A gigantic army broke in, eliminating the Poles' resistance, and in order for Polish armies not to be destroyed, they had to withdraw as quickly as possible. Hence, the Polish forces withdrew faster in the north of the Eastern Front than in the south. We managed to stop on the Dniester River line. In the south, they went back to Niemen, even further away. Finally, the key Brest fortress fell, seized by the Bolsheviks. The Poles simply did not manage to man it. At that time, the Poles had to stop the Russians and stop them on the Vistula River in the vicinity of Warsaw. This was the third maneuver that Piłsudski made, the third time he succeeded. The army was detained on the banks of the Vistula River, north and south of Warsaw. The Bolsheviks didn't manage to reach as far as the place where we sit today. After the victorious Battle of Radzymin on August 15th, which is a religious and national holiday in Poland, on August 16th, an offensive began from the south, which cut off an army of almost 200,000 units from Mother Russia. This army mostly fell into Polish hands and was taken prisoner. Parts of it broke through East Prussia to Belarus and took part in the next battle, in which it was completely defeated, at the Battle of Niemen.
I tam brała udział w drugiej kolejnej bitwie, w której już została kompletnie rozgromiona, bitwie niemeńskiej.
The Battle of Warsaw was the decisive point of the Polish-Bolshevik War. It saved Europe from an imminent communist invasion and gave Poland a vital 20 years as an independent state before the outbreak of the Second World War. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.